So, hello there, and welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, here it is. I'm giving you my spoiler review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. But before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, that if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello there to my viewers, but you prefer to listen to podcasts, well, you can with this one as well. If you go to Spotify and look up Night of the Movies out there, this podcast should come up. And if you are already listening on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also watch this podcast visually on my YouTube channel and Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course. And leave me some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts. Yes, because feedback is always much appreciated. Also, I should say, and if you've been following my podcast lately, you'll know what I'm going to say here. It is still the ongoing saga of hay fever. Yes, I first spoke about my problems with hay fever in my podcast on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Great film, by the way. And those problems have continued. Although my hay fever isn't as bad today, it isn't great. So though, I was sneezing this morning, and so if I'm sniffling throughout this podcast, I apologise. If I sound a bit bummed up in this podcast, I also apologise. And if this podcast isn't the best, it's just because I'm feeling a bit under the weather as well, because that is what hay fever does to you. Yes, I really hate hay fever. It's one of the reasons I hate the summer. But apart from that, this should be a very entertaining podcast to listen to and or watch. So, let's get into it. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Just before I get into my spoiler thoughts on this movie, I should say this as well. It's been a long journey to get here for me, a long journey to this podcast today, because I've been so excited for this movie for such a long time. I remember about 3 years ago thinking, in 2023, we're going to get a new Indiana Jones film. Wow. And over the time on this channel, I've been talking non-stop about it. I mean, maybe not non-stop actually, but I've spoken a lot about it on this channel. And over the past couple of weeks, I've been doing Indiana Jones podcasts. I did a podcast on my guide to the Young Indiana Jones to show you people how much, to show you, listening at home or watching at home, how much I loved that show. And then I also did 45-minute podcast all over, in regard to the previous 4 Indiana Jones movies, and I did another podcast on Young Indy and why it's not on Disney Plus in the UK at the moment. It still isn't, according to my Disney Plus, which is a bit annoying, but you get the point I'm making. I am such a huge Indiana Jones fan, and I've been speaking about this movie and speaking about past Indiana Jones movies for what feels like quite a long time on this channel. So this is why this would be my last Indiana Jones podcast that I do for at least a while. I'm not going to say never, and I mean, of course not never. I want to talk about Indiana Jones in the future. The first few Indiana Jones movies are some of my favourite movies of all time. In fact, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, still today, is my favourite movie of all time. But I also want to talk about other stuff. Like, over the past week, I've been watching new TV shows, but I haven't talked about them, even though I finished them, because I've been talking about Indiana Jones on this channel, and now I want to stop talking about Indiana Jones for a bit. So I'm not saying I'll never talk about Indiana Jones again on this channel. Almost definitely I will, but just not for a while. This is going to be my last Indiana Jones review that I do, at least for a while. Let's just leave it there. But I do still have this review to do. I do still have my spoiler review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny to do. So, without further ado, let's get into it. And let's get into my spoiler review of the new Indiana Jones film, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And just in case you didn't read the title of this podcast, or just in case you didn't hear me mention the word spoiler quite a few times already in this podcast, I'm going to reiterate that this is a spoiler review. So if you haven't seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny yet, and you're wanting to, you haven't got round to it, and you don't know anything about it, then click off this podcast now, put it in your safe later playlist or whatever, and come back to it once you've seen the new Indiana Jones film, because I'm going to be talking about it in some big spoilery detail. So yes, here is your final warning. Spoiler warning! There you go, your final warning. Let's get into it. My spoiler thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. How many times am I going to say the title of the film in this podcast tonight? But you know, here is my spoiler review on the new Indiana Jones film. So, I really liked this movie. I really enjoyed it. And I've seen it 3 times now. You know, when I did my non-spoiler review, it wasn't really a review, it was more me just talking about my thoughts on this film in a non-spoilery fashion. But when I first did my review of this movie, I'd only seen it twice. And when I went to go watch it a 3rd time, I was sitting in the cinema thinking, am I going to like this movie as much as I did the previous 2 times? Because the first 2 times I saw this film were on the same day. So I was very much in that Indiana Jones spirit, you know? I wanted to love this movie. I wanted to really like it. And I was wondering whether I was watching it in a certain way because of that. And the 3rd time I watched it, it was a couple of days after I'd seen it for the first time. So I was able to take everything in a bit more. And guess what? I still think the movie's great. I still really like it. You mean, I like it even more than I did the first 2 times because I think it's a great old Indiana Jones movie. I don't know if it's a great Indiana Jones movie, but I think it's a great old Indiana Jones movie because it follows a character at this point in his life when he's about 70 years old, and it feels like where the character would be when you meet him in 1969 in this movie, because he's been through a hell of a lot. You know, we learn in this film that he lost his son. His son went to fight in Vietnam and he died there. We learned previously in the last Indiana Jones movie that his father has now passed away, that Indy's father has now passed away. We've also learned that Marcus Brody, someone very close to Indy, has also passed away, and that the loss of Indy's son drove Marion away as well. So we know by this point in the Indiana Jones story that he's got basically nobody anymore. He's got nobody, and you see he's living alone in this apartment in New York, and you know, he's still a professor, but no one really cares about him anymore in his profession, or they don't care about him too much. And he's just not the same. He's just not the same Indiana Jones, and I really, really loved that because it makes sense for this character. You know, he's always doing something different. You know, something that the young Indiana Jones series really emphasised and really goes into. He's always meeting new people. He doesn't really stick around one person for too long, and he doesn't really have one friend for too long. Even his own father, he's got a strained relationship with because he doesn't see him as much as you would do. You know, as much as you should do, as much as he should have done. And this film really showcases what it's like for somebody like the Indiana Jones character, where he would be. It's logical, that's what I'm saying. It's logical for where this character would be because, you know, he's just going from person to person to person. He doesn't really settle down. Yes, he settles down at the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the last Indiana Jones movie, but we learned that since the event of that film, when it's been 15 years, a lot has happened. And I really liked this version of Indiana Jones because it felt natural. You know, the old Indiana Jones that we get in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull doesn't feel believable enough. You know, when he's doing that, when he's running across the tiles, is it tiles? Like the pieces of wood on the top of the warehouse in the first action sequence from Crystal Skull, I don't believe in it. And I think Crystal Skull feels like this weird fever dream, you know what I mean? It feels like this weird fever dream of what an old Indiana Jones movie should be, whilst Dial of Destiny feels like you've woken up from the dream. It feels like, okay, this is what reality is. And that's one of the reasons I think it works so well, because it feels real. The Indiana Jones character feels real in this film. In the first Indiana Jones movies, he's presented this hero. You know, he's a hero, he's got his flaws, but he's this hero that is unstoppable and making up when it goes along, and he gets into trouble, but he always manages to save the day just in the nick of time. But in this movie, it shows you the effects of his past adventures, of his past relationships, and how how that has made him the person he is when he's 70 years old. And by the way, he is 70 years old in the film. I know Harrison Ford in real life is 80 years old, but according to the Young Indiana Jones series, and no one said that that series is not canon, so I'm going to assume that it is. According to the Young Indiana Jones series, Indy was born in 1899 on the turn of the century, so he's always 1 year older than when any of the Indiana Jones films are set. You know, in Temple of Doom, which chronologically is the first Indiana Jones movie, he is 36 years old. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's 37. In Last Crusade, he's 39. And I think Crystal Skull is set in 1957, so it'd be 58 there. And here, this movie is predominantly set in 1969, so he's 70 years old. And I liked how they just went headfirst with that. He's lost everything. He is this person who is alone because of everything he's done in the past. And it felt natural. It felt right for the Indiana Jones character. And, you know, it also felt right, the fact that at the beginning of the film, he's quite a selfish man. I mean, what I mean by the beginning is when you first meet him as this old, frail Indiana Jones, he's quite a selfish man. You know, when we first meet him, Magical Mystery Tour is being blasted out by the neighbours, and sign on here, the song Magical Mystery Tour is from one of my favourite bands, the Beatles, who, even, you know, are one of my favourite bands, or not my favourite band, you know. I love their music so much and I listen to it daily. And so that was a really nice surprise to hear their music in the movie, because it's really hard, apparently it's really hard and expensive to license their music for anything. Although, I'd already heard that this song was used in the film when I read a review of the movie a couple of days before I saw it. It really annoyed me. Like, even though it's not a big plot point, the fact that Magical Mystery Tour, the song by the Beatles, is used at one point in the film, it's not a big plot point whatsoever. It's just one of those details that I would have liked to not know about prior to watching this film. But it is what it is. And, you know, I like the way it was used in there. But we see him at the start of the movie. The point I was making, we see him at the start of the movie. He's woken up by the neighbours. We're blasting Magical Mystery Tour out. Great way to set up the time period for the film, by the way, because Magical Mystery Tour came out in the 60s and the late 60s of that. So that sets the time period of the film the same way Hound Dog does at the start of the last Indiana Jones movie. You know, I love the way they do that. But at the same time, the point I'm making is that when he's woken up by the song, he's grouchy, he's mean, he's like, turn down the music to his neighbours because he only cares about himself. And then when Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, Helena, comes into the movie, he starts becoming more selfless and he starts caring for others because she's his goddaughter. And even though they don't have the best relation in the movie because they haven't seen each other for so long, you can still tell that he cares about, and he cares about Ted as well, who goes along the adventure. You know, the young kid who reminds you of Short Round, but he's not Short Round. You know, he cares for him as well, and you see by in this movie that he becomes selfless again, like he does at the end of every other Indiana Jones film. That is the point of his character in every Indiana Jones movie. That at the start of the film, he's quite selfless. He's on this adventure for himself, and then, or he's doing things for himself. In the case of this movie, he doesn't want to go on an adventure. He just wants to live by himself in his retirement and doesn't really want to reconnect with anyone else. Even so, you know, Marion's his one true love. He doesn't even want to reconnect with her. He just wants to stay in an apartment in New York and doesn't want to go on any adventure. Then by the end of the movie, he's reconnected with Marion, and I loved the ending of the film. Loved it so much, especially because a couple moments ago, before the film came out, and I hadn't read any leaks about the movie, I was very cautious online in regards to leaks for the new Indiana Jones film. I came up with this theory when I was speaking with Lewis, who was on one of my podcasts, regarding my excitement for the new Indiana Jones movie a couple of days ago. I spoke about how I thought the film was going to end with Marion, Indy and Sallah in one room together, and you have, you know, a Raiders of the Lost Ark reunion, if you will. And even though it wasn't exactly that, you know, Sallah doesn't really interact with Marion in that final scene, it still is kind of that, and so I was really happy that my theory was correct. And when that happened the first time I saw it, when Marion came through the door and you saw them reconnect with each other in that really nice callback to the very romantic scene that you see in Radio between Indy and Marion on the boat. You know, and he goes, where doesn't it hurt? It doesn't hurt there. You know, they had a nice little callback to that at the end of the movie. I just had the biggest grin on my face because it showed you Indy's character development. You know, he'd gone from selfish to selfless again, you know, to selfless again, which, you know, he usually does with every Indiana Jones movie. And also, I thought it was a perfect end for his character because, you know, even so they reconnected in the movie, it is slightly ambiguous as well. Are they going to stay together, or is the subject of Mutt's death going to drive them apart again? I think that was left very well, because one of my problems with the Crystal Skull ending, actually, even so I really like the way Crystal Skull ends, one of my problems with it is it's done, it's like this surreal, perfect, and I'd say perfect with quotation marks, this surreal perfect ending where everything's shiny, everything's perfect with Marion and Indy's wedding, and it doesn't feel real, whilst the ending of this film feels real for the Indiana Jones character. Indiana Jones wouldn't settle down when you think about it. Indiana Jones would be like he is at the end of this movie. He reconnects with Marion, but are they going to get back together properly? We don't know, and we don't need to know. That's what I loved about the end of this film. And I loved the way they tackled the idea of an old Indiana Jones, and that's what this movie feels like. It feels like an old Indiana Jones movie. People are going into this film expecting to relive the magic of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, or Last Crusade. I think we're going into this film with the wrong idea. It's an old Indiana Jones movie. Indy is meant to be 70 in this film. You know, in real life, when Harrison Ford shot this movie, he was about 78 because he shot it about 2 years ago now. So he wasn't going to be the same Indy going under the truck like he does in Raiders of the Lost Ark during the truck chase. He wasn't going to be the same Indy fighting the tank that you see in Last Crusade, or splitting the bridge in half towards the end of the film like he does in Temple of Doom. He's an old Indiana Jones, and they really zone in on that. It's a character study of where the Indiana Jones character would be at this point in his life, and you know what? That worked. It worked for me, and I was sitting there going, yes, this is what this film should be. It shouldn't be a copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark, or a copy of Temple of Doom, or Last Crusade. And it definitely shouldn't be a copy of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It should be its own thing. And what James Mangold did, because he was also a co-writer on this film, but what he did with the writing, the directing, was show you and give you a old Indiana Jones story that I thought worked the best it could have been. This is the best version of a fifth Indiana Jones movie we could have gotten. I don't think this film could have been better. Like, I know Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is an old Indiana Jones movie, but it's not a good one because it doesn't really tackle the subject of his age. There's jokes about his age in that movie, but more than anything, it's just another Indiana Jones adventure further down the line after the events of the first three films. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I just really liked the whole way they tackled the stuff of his age in this movie. That's the thing I really admired the most, and how Mutt died. I like the fact that, you know, Shia LaBeouf wasn't going to return for the 59 Jones movie because he, in between, you know, the making of this film and the release of Crystal Skull, Shia LaBeouf, who played Mutt in Crystal Skull, you know, played Indy's son in that movie, he said some really mean stuff about Spielberg, and didn't, from what I've heard, didn't say some great stuff about Harrison Ford either, though I haven't read any of that. But I have read some of the comments he said about Spielberg, and I'm not going to reiterate them here because that's not the point of this podcast. But, you know, I knew that even though Spielberg wasn't directing this new Indiana Jones movie, he was still going to be involved in it. I also had a good guess that Shia LaBeouf wouldn't return as Mutt. So I love how they tackled that character. They killed him off, but they didn't just say, oh, he's dead, and leave it as a one-off line that didn't really mean anything. He's dead, and that's one of the major plot points of the film, and, you know, it's one of the reasons that Marion's not there on this adventure, but they keep hinting at her. They keep hinting at her. You know, at the start of the film, we see Indy in 1969 for the first time. You know, he's got this separation agreement on his counter in his apartment. You know that he's on the brink of divorce with Marion. He's got a picture on the fridge. Even at the very start of the film, when you see all the stuff on the train, there's a picture of Marion there, and Sallah, it calls back, you know, he says, you know, and Sallah as well, when he meets Indy later on in the movie, he says, have you tried contacting Marion? You know, they keep hinting at Marion throughout the film, and I loved how they did that, and I just loved how they tackled the old Indiana Jones idea. But that also the whole thing is about an old Indiana Jones movie is I don't think it can be great though. That's my other, well, it's not my other issue. I've got a lot of issues in my, and that's kind of that's one of my problems with the movie. The whole idea that could an old Indiana Jones film work, and I think it can, but I also don't think it can be great, and that's why I don't think this movie. That's why I don't love this film, because I don't think an old Indiana Jones movie can be great, because it's never going to have the same excitement as the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, because it's not going to have the same action sequences. And it can't have Indy doing all these extravagant stunts because he's at the age he's at now. So it's never going to be an amazing film like Last Crusade, Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Temple of Doom. It wasn't going to have those amazing stunts, those amazing action sequences, because Indy is at the age he's at now in this movie. So I don't think an old Indiana Jones movie could ever be brilliant. But as I've already mentioned, I do think they made the best film possible, considering Harrison Ford is at the age he is now, and considering the Indiana Jones character, who's meant to be younger than Harrison Ford's real age, but considering that the Indiana Jones character is meant to be at the age he's at now as well. So I thought they made the best movie they could. My big problem with this film isn't really anything story-wise. Like, I know people have problems with the final act of the movie, the big finale where they go back in time, they do the time travel stuff. Really didn't bother me. I mean, I don't know what film other people watching, but I've heard some people really complaining about it. Some people I really admire, and I mean, I understand to a degree, but after Aliens at the end of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where do you go next? Time travel. It makes sense. Also, you learn in the past 4 Indiana Jones movies, the character of Indiana Jones is obsessed with the past. And so the fact that he actually gets to go back to the past, I thought made sense. I thought it made sense with the character. It made sense with the story, because once he brought the whole idea of the dial and the MacGuffin, the film, the artifact, and the fact that it could do time travel, I was like, okay, that's exactly what it's going to do. That's exactly what this movie is going to do in its big finale. It's going to be a big time travel thing. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's what the end of this movie is going to do. It's going to go back in time. And I was fine with the way they did it. My only issue is that I think that there could have been more done in that final act when they went back in time. You know, there's this big battle happening with the Romans. I forgot what time period it is now off the top of my head, but they do mention it in the movie. But there's this big battle sequence happening, and Indy and Helena are just stood in the middle of it. And I was like, really? Oh, is that what you're going to do? Indy could have this, I don't know, cool fight with a Roman. I know he's 70, but it still could be quite fun. Or they could have a call back to Raiders, like when he uses the gun against the man in Cairo. I don't know, you could have done something more in that finale. But I didn't mind the idea of it. And one of the things I really liked in that big finale was when Indy is being shot and he's saying, I'm going to stay here to Helena. He says to Helena, I'm going to stay here. You know, I've got nothing left to me in my present. I'm going to stay here in the past because this is what has been my passion for so long. And then Helena's like, no, you have to come back to the present. And she punches him. And I've heard some people complain about that. I thought it made sense. And I liked the fact that she punches him, because one of the things I was scared about at one point in this movie, because Indy gets shot at one point in this movie by one of the villain's henchmen, I was scared they were going to kill the character of Indiana Jones. And I'm not in love with that idea, because a lot of these beloved movie characters have been dying in movies recently. Bond dies in No Time to Die. Spoiler here for some of these films, but you know, it is what it is. You know, they've been out for a couple of years now, or whatever. Bond dies in No Time to Die. Luke Skywalker dies in The Last Jedi. Princess Leia dies in The Rise of Skywalker, and Han Solo dies in Star Wars Force Awakens. There's probably other examples, but those are the ones that come to mind right now as I'm doing this podcast. And I like the way that some of those characters die. I'm just not in love with the idea of killing these characters off. Although I actually think it worked really well with Han Solo in The Force Awakens and with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I don't care what anyone says. I like what they did with Luke in that movie, but that's another topic for another day. So I was scared though, because this is from Lucasfilm, who also did the Star Wars sequel trilogy where Luke Skywalker, Han Solo and Princess Leia died, that they were going to kill off Indiana Jones. I thought that was going to happen. And when Indy got shot, I was like, oh no, they're going to kill him off. And they tease her, and then Helena punches him and goes, no, you're coming back to the present, I'm going to save you. And I'm like, Thank God, because I don't want this movie being tainted for me when I go back and rewatch it, knowing that, oh, Indy died at this time. I quite enjoyed it, but then Indy's gonna die. Oh, you know, because some of my experience, you know, some of my rewatching experience had been tainted by the fact that Han Solo dies in The Force Awakens, or that Luke dies in The Last Jedi. Even though narratively I think those are the right decisions for those characters in those movies, and the same thing with No Time to Die as well. I still don't love the idea that these characters die. It's just the way it is. It's the way it is with me, because I love these characters so much. I don't want them to die, and even though Indy dying might have been a very emotional scene and might have worked, you know, in the context of the film, I just wouldn't be in love with the idea. But then they didn't kill him, and I was really happy with the fact that they didn't. And I also really like the idea that he wants to stay in the past as well, because he's been a man so obsessed with the past, as we learn in the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, and in the 4th one to a degree as well. And how he's saying, there's nothing left for me in the present, and he goes back to the present, and Marion's there. There is somebody left for him. They're still in love. They've just been through some hard times together. And that's like anybody as well. It's one of the reasons I really love the ending, and we love the Indiana Jones character in this film. He feels real. He feels like what many people are feeling like. I think right now, especially after, you know, the pandemic, touch wood, has been and gone, and how I think we've all lost something in our time. I've already lost somebody close to us. I know I have. And so when when Indy is the way he is in this movie, it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I know I keep emphasising that. I know I keep going on about, oh yeah, it makes sense of the character and it feels real, but it just really does for me. It really feels real, and I really loved the way they wrote the Indiana Jones character in this film. And I just loved how it became more of a character study on him, and how the film was slower for that as well. It's just, you know, it is at times a slow movie. It isn't as fast-paced and as exciting as Temple of Doom, which is so in your face, or Last Crusade, or Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I'm okay with that as well. I was okay with that. I was okay with the runtime. I wouldn't really cut anything out of this movie. I mean, nothing major anyway. And yeah, I thought all the old Indy stuff really worked, was the thing that I was worried about. I even thought the action sequences of him worked as well, because he's meant to be 70 years old. The character of Indiana Jones is meant to be 70 years old. He's not meant to be 80 years old, like Harrison Ford is in real life. I just want to keep emphasising that, because I've heard some people, you know, criticise some of the action sequences in the movie, like the tuk-tuk chase at one point that you see is in Morocco, I think. And also, I keep saying and also at the moment, it's an annoying habit I've got, but you know, the action sequences in this movie, I heard some people complain about them. And for me, they worked because they weren't too big. You know what I mean? They weren't too over the top. And even though I have some problems with the action sequences, mainly the way they were shot, I've got no problems with Indy doing what he did in those action sequences. I mean, my problem with the action sequences, really, is the direction from James Mangold. I mean, I think James Mangold is a good director. I've spoken about that at length on this channel before. Made some very good movies in the past, like Walk the Line, Logan, Ford v Ferrari, 310 to Yuma, Identity. I could go on and on and on. He's made some cracking films. But I don't think his direction in the action sequences is as confident as Spielberg's directing with any... I'm not going to say any of the action sequences actually, but with the action in the previous 4 Indiana Jones movies. Yeah, even in the 4th Indiana Jones film, Spielberg has his gravitas with the way he's directing the action sequences. It just flow really well. And I thought that some of the action in this movie didn't flow as well as it could have done. I enjoyed the action sequences, I did. But I don't think they're quite as good as it could be, because there's so much editing going on, and I think that James Mangold is used to that with the action sequences in his films, that the action in this movie didn't feel as Indiana Jones as I wanted it to. Like, the Indiana Jones action sequences didn't feel like classic Indiana Jones action sequences, because they didn't have that flowing camera movement that you get in like the airplane fight sequence in Raiders of the Lost Ark, or they didn't have that same excitement and just the same directing as many of the other action sequences in previous Indiana Jones movies. And yeah, they didn't have the same spark for me. That's what I'm going to say. They didn't have the same spark for me in the action sequences, even though, for example, in the tuk chase, James Mangold is evoking the minecart chase in Temple of Doom. He's also evoking the basket chase in Raiders Lost Ark, and he's evoking the Venice boat chase from Last Crusade as well. I like how he does that in the tuk-tuk chase in the movie. He also evoked a bit of the chase through Princeton on the back of on Mutt's bike in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I like how he does that. I thought the action sequences could have been better and had more flow to them. I think they're good. I think they're entertaining. But it was really the tuk-tuk chase where I was like, yeah, this doesn't have that Spielberg touch. And, you know, I asked somebody who I watched this with, you know, if you didn't know, I saw this with the person I watched the film with the third time, I asked them, like, if you didn't know that this film wasn't directed by Spielberg, would you think it is? And they said to me, probably not. And I think that was okay, though, because I think James Mangold is a good director, and what I think he really shines with in this movie is directing the dialogue sequences. And so, although we don't have that Spielberg magic in the action sequences of this movie, I'm okay with the fact that Spielberg didn't direct it, though, even though part of me kind of wants to see what a fifth Indiana Jones movie directed by Spielberg would be like, although part of me doesn't, because I don't think his heart was there with the fourth Indiana Jones movie, as I spoke about at length in my podcast on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But you understand the point I'm making. You know, it feels like a James Mangold movie, and I'm okay about that. I like James Mangold as a director, and like I said before, where I think he really shines is in dialogue scenes which have so much power to them. You know, scenes where just two characters talking. You know, that's one thing I've watched almost all of his movies now. I haven't seen his very first film because I couldn't really track it down anywhere. It wasn't on his streaming service, and it was quite expensive to buy on DVD. So I haven't seen all of his movies, but I've seen almost all of his movies. And one thing that I was really impressed by in all of his films, even in the likes of Kate and Leopold, which is a rom-com he directed, which I wasn't a huge fan of. You know, even in some of his lesser movies, like Kate and Leopold and Nine to the Day and stuff like that, I was always impressed by some of the dialogue sequences, though, and how he just zones on these two characters talking, and the way he frames the camera in those scenes, and the way he focuses on characters and doesn't take the camera off them for too long. Just there's some of his directing in conversation scenes in his movies which I think have so much power to them, and I think he really showcased that with scenes like when Indy tells Helena about Mutt's death in this movie when they're on the boat, or when Indy is when Indy's talking to Helena when they're having their first conversation early on in the film, and she's talking about this dial and how she wants to go after it, or the last in the film, you know, between Indy and Marion, or when Indy is saying to Helena when they're all the way back in the past how he wants to stay here. You know, I thought those scenes really worked because of James Mangold's direction. I must admit, half an hour into this podcast, I haven't gotten to my problems yet. My biggest problem with this film isn't the final act, which, yeah, it's a bit silly, but all the final acts from the Indiana Jones movies get silly. You know, they all use the MacGuffin. You know, in Raiders Lost Ark, the Ark is the MacGuffin. It's the artifact, and they use it, and spirits come out of it. Face melt. Loads of face melts. Loads of face melts, is that correct English? Loads of face melting. You see lots of face melting in that final act of Raiders Lost Ark, and it's silly, but it works. In Temple of Doom, the Shinako stones burn, you know, in broad daylight. In Last Crusade, you see the Grail at night, you know, and the Cup of Christ saves Henry Jones Sr., and in Crystal Skull, you see aliens. You know, they all get a bit silly, and I thought that the finale of the film made sense with the film as a whole. I didn't mind the finale whatsoever. I think that my biggest problem is the villain. I don't think the villain is a completely realised character, and I think it could have been wrote better. I think that the writing with Jürgen Voller, I think that's what the character's called, Jürgen Voller, played great by Mads Mikkelsen, by the way. I'm not saying anything bad about Mads Mikkelsen's performance. I met Mads Mikkelsen at Star Celebration. I only met him for like 30 seconds, but it still was great to meet him. And now I can say I met the villain of the latest Indiana Jones movie, the 5th Indiana Jones installment. That I think he's good in the film, but I think they could have done so much more with the character. That's my problem, though. You know, we find out in the movie that he works for NASA, and he worked on the rocket, you know, the first rocket that took the astronauts to Mars. not to Mars, what am I going on about? We took the astronauts to the moon. God, my head's in a bit of a weird place today because I'm recording this on a Saturday and I'm quite tired because I've had a long week. So cut behind the curtain there, but yeah, not to Mars. The astronauts that went to the moon, the first astronauts, worked on that rocket at NASA, and they explored that, but they could have explored that more. They could have gone into depth there more and showed how he's a bit more of a complex character, because we also learn in his reintroduction after the opening sequence, when we first meet Voller, the villain in 1969, we see him be quite mean to that waiter. That waiter comes in his hotel room, and the waiter is African American, and Voller says to him, "Oh, where are you from?" And he goes, "I was born in the Bronx." "No, where are your people from?" And I thought, okay, yep, you're not meant to like him whatsoever right now, and I really liked how they did that. But I also think they could have explored how he works at NASA a bit more, and they could have done something there, I think. Showed that he isn't just a totally awful person. I don't know, maybe not. But one of the things I really didn't like about the character was how he didn't really get that evil. I wanted him to really show how threatening he could be, like the Ram in Temple of Doom, or even like Cate Blanchett's villain in King of the Crystal Skull. You really see how evil these villains get as the films go on, and in this movie, as the film goes on though, Voller pretty much stays the same. You don't see him really get that evil. Even when he puts his plan into action, and he puts that Nazi uniform on and he gets on the plane, I thought, okay, this is the moment you're going to see Voller be really, really evil to Indy. He's going to whack him over the head like General Vogel does. Is it Vogel or Vogel? The general does, the evil Nazi general does in Last Crusade when Indy's tied up with his father in the chair. He hits Indy over the head with that stick. I thought that was what's going to happen with Voller. I'm not saying I wanted that to happen. I mean, actually, I kind of did, because it would have added more to the Voller character, though, really sort of evil he was and how much he hated the Indiana Jones character. But instead, it feels like he kind of respects the Indiana Jones character, because as they're going into the time travel thing on the plane, Indy's saying, "No, you're going back to the wrong time," and then Voller starts to listen to him. I'm like, what? Why are you listening to him? You should be sticking to your guts. That's the whole thing about all these Indiana Jones villains. They think they're all correct until they're proven wrong, and yet Voller is, Indy's telling Voller, you're wrong, and Voller believes in him. I'm like, what? No, don't believe him. Be more evil. I want to see you punch Indy. I want to see you actually be really mean to him, whilst in the end, I think Voller kind of respected Indy. I mean, that's the way they wrote the character. That's my biggest problem. I really wish the villain was better, because Mads Mikkelsen is a damn good actor. He is a really good actor. If you don't believe me, watch The Hunt. That's by Thomas Vinterberg, which I'm pretty sure is still on Prime Video. At least that's what I watched on a couple of months ago. And he is amazing in that movie. And he's good in this film. But I think his talent could have been utilised more. I really wish they gave him more to do in this movie. He's even brilliant. He's even better in Rogue One. He's not even got, he's not even got a huge role in Rogue One. He's not in Rogue One for like 10 minutes, and in this movie, he's in it loads. But I just wish the character was more interesting, compelling, and was better written, and had more to do in the end, because he just dies in a plane crash. And I was like, even the villain in King of the Crystal Skull had more to do. I was thinking the other day, which should I prefer? Cate Blanchett's villain in Crystal Skull, or Mads Mikkelsen's villain in Dial of Destiny? And even though I love Mads Mikkelsen, I might say Cate Blanchett's villain in Crystal Skull, because she had more to do. Mads Mikkelsen has shot a few people in this movie, and he dressed in a Nazi uniform, and, I didn't like the character, like you're not meant to like the character. It's one of those characters you like to hate, but I still wish more could have been done with him. And another problem I have with this movie, this isn't even a huge problem, but it is a problem I have with this film, is the MacGuffin, the whole thing to do with the dial. I don't mind the idea of time travel, as I've already spoken about. After Crystal Skull, the whole idea of the aliens, where do you go next? Time travel. Makes perfect sense. Not got anything wrong with the time travel element. My problem with the MacGuffin and the whole idea with the dial is the way it's incorporated into the plot. I was more interested in the whole stuff with Indiana Jones at his old age now, and how he's back in this adventure that he doesn't really want to be on, and he's trying to get the dial back. I was more interested in the old Indy storyline that this film had. I wasn't really that interested in the dial stuff because of the way it was written. It feels like it's forgotten about until it becomes important throughout the movie. And it feels like the Shinakwa Stones in Temple of Doom. Like, one thing I didn't really talk about in my Temple of Doom podcast was how the Shinakwa Stones, the MacGuffin in Temple of Doom, is sort of put on the back burner in that movie until the end of the film when the Maulerman wants it back after Indy's stolen them. You know, it doesn't really seem that important. And I think the dial is similar to that. In fact, I actually prefer the dial than the Shinakwa Stones in Temple of Doom. I prefer the dial in this movie because at least it had more to do. Shinakwa Stones just apparently gave life to this village. Although, yeah, I don't know, it didn't really do much for me, the whole Shinakwa Stone storyline in Temple of Doom. Also, Dial, I like the idea of time travel in this movie. I don't care what anyone says. I thought it was a fine idea. I just think they could have focused on it more. I know it is, you know, intertwined into the plot throughout, but it could have been more of a focus. And it's instead, it feels like towards in the movie, oh, we haven't done anything with the Dial. Do something with the dial. That's what it feels like for me. And I didn't find the MacGuffin in this movie nearly as compelling as the MacGuffin in the in the Last Crusade with the Holy Grail, or in Raiders of the Lost Ark with the Ark. I didn't find it nearly as compelling, although it's definitely a better MacGuffin than the Crystal Skull in King of the Crystal Skull, because at least you didn't bring aliens to the Indiana Jones franchise. It's not sure why we had aliens in Crystal Skull. I've already talked about that in my podcast on that movie, but that really annoyed me. And I also thought it worked better than Shinakwa Stone and Temple of Doom, but I still don't know if it was a great idea, though. I actually would have preferred it if the dial wasn't used, and instead, in the final act of the film, they try to use a dial and they fail, and the film becomes more about how the last artifact that Indy's been chasing was just a fake or something like that. I think that might have been more of an interesting idea. And again, I don't mind time travel, but I don't know. I thought that the MacGuffin could have been better. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't really like it either. But a lot of people have been complaining about Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, Helena. I honestly don't see what people have wrong with that character. I mean, I don't love the character. I don't think she's Indy's best female sidekick. I think Marion is still Indy's best female sidekick today. I love her in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and she's one of the best things about Crystal Skull, even though she didn't have much of a character arc in that movie. But in this film, I also really enjoyed Helena, and that's coming from somebody who's not a big Phoebe Waller-Bridge fan. And I watched the movie for a third time with somebody who's not also a big Phoebe Waller-Bridge fan. He didn't really like their work in Fleabag, and yet we both came out of the movie the third time and went, you know what, she was pretty good. I don't see what the complaint's about. Sure, she's a bit cocky, and there's a couple of lines of dialogue which I don't think the character needed. Like, for instance, when they're in Morocco on the film, just after the auction, and Indy and Helena are caught by the police, and Indy's like, tell them I had nothing to do with it, and Helena goes, you know, oh, I just said that they should shoot you. I just said shoot him instead of me. I didn't like that line of dialogue. It's something like that. I didn't love that line of dialogue. And also, later in the movie, I said, and also again, and later on in the movie, when she's talking to Teddy and saying, I'm still in charge here, you know, I'm still in charge, I'm still running the show. That's where she says something like that later on in the film. I wasn't in love with that line of dialogue either, because I just don't think it was needed. You know, I was like, oh, come on, you can just move on now. You don't need that line of dialogue. You don't need... I've been doing this podcast for over 40 minutes. Give me a break. You know, I don't know if that line of dialogue was needed, but even though the character was a bit cocky, I still enjoyed watching though, because I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge gave a good performance, different than what I've seen her done before, because I have seen about 10 minutes of Fleabag, and she played a certain character in that show, and she plays a different character in this movie. I liked the character, I liked the way the character was written. I'd also heard some people say, why would Indy help her? She's an annoying character, and she's very selfish, and she doesn't really care about him. First of all, Indy is her godfather, and they have a strained relationship though, because he hasn't seen each other in like 18 years, and that's what they say in the movie. They haven't seen each other for 18 years, and so much like most of Indy's relationships in all of the Indiana Jones movies, even in the young Indiana Jones show as well, it's a strained relationship. Indy has a strained relationship with his father in Last Crusade. He has a strained relationship with Short Round in Temple Doom. He has a strained relationship with Marion and... I'm not going to say Sallah. No, he does have a strained relationship with Sallah in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he has a strained relationship with Mutt in King of the Crystal Skull. It's another strained relationship in an Indiana Jones movie. And it makes sense with the character. And the fact that their relationship is a bit strained... And maybe now it's that word probably strained. I think I'm not sure if I'm, I'm at that point in the day. But anyway, even though the relationship is it makes sense that relationship is strained because they haven't seen each other in 18 years. And Indy doesn't actually want to help Helena. He wants a dial back from her, which is why he goes on the adventure. And he wants to help Helena and Teddy towards the end. He cares for them. But that's because the character's grown over time. The reason he goes to Morocco, though, is to get the dial back and to get out of New York because he's a wanted man. Not to go and help Helena. It's to go and get the dial back. And we actually see towards in the film that Helena does care for Indy. And when Indy gets shot by one of Voller's henchmen, she goes, Indy! And then she gets him back from the past when he wants to stay in the past. She cares about him. She is there from when he wakes up in 1969. In the end, she cares about Indy. And I like that character. I can't lie, I enjoyed watching that character. Is she the best female sidekick of the Indiana Jones franchise? No, that's still Marion. I'm still glad she was in this movie. But I thought she was good. I enjoyed that character. And you know what? I thought she was better than Willie in Temple of Doom. He's a really annoying character. But anyway, going back onto issues I had with the movie, I'm not in love with the opening. I thought the opening... Well, initially when I saw the film, I thought this was the weakest opening of the entirety of the Indiana Jones franchise. It's actually grown on me a bit after seeing it a third time. I still think some of the editing in the opening is a bit choppy, and it doesn't quite have... The John Williams musical score isn't quite as memorable as the John Williams musical score used in the opening sequence of Last Crusade or Raiders of the Lost Ark. It doesn't have that same sort of joy when you listen to it. But at the same time, I like the fact that in the opening sequence there's a lot of callbacks to the John Williams music, and I've already spoken about this. Even though I had problems with the John Williams musical score in this movie, I'm just glad that we got another John Williams Indiana Jones score. So that didn't really bother me, but. I do think the score could have been a bit better in the opening. And it just didn't grab me, more than anything. And it didn't really add much to Indiana Jones' character, in my opinion. I know James Mangold says that he did this opening as a callback to the first three Indiana Jones films, more specifically Last Crusade and Raiders, because that's when you see him fighting Nazis. And so I like that whole idea, but I still think that wasn't James Mangold's idea to have the opening... in 1944. I still think that was a studio now. I still think that's Lucasfilm going, put the opening of this movie in 1944 so we can remind all the people why they love the Indiana Jones franchise at the start of the film. And it's not a bad idea, but I just wish I added more to the Indiana Jones character. You could say the same about young Indy at the start of Last Crusade, except you can't because that does add so much to the Indiana Jones character. If the only thing you ever saw of the Indiana Jones franchise was the beginning of Indiana Jones and Last Crusade with young Indy and, trying to get the Cross of Coronado and fighting those miners, and and then you see at the end of that sequence that he has a strained relationship with his father. That's all you'd seen in the whole Indiana Jones franchise. You know everything about the Indiana Jones character, even though they hate snakes for that sequence, and you learn how he gets a scar on his chin as well. In the opening of Last Crusade, you learn everything you need to know about Indy, and the opening of Raiders as well. You learn everything you need to know about Indy for Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I also think the Temple of Doom opening sequence is just so much fun as well, and shows you a different side to Indy and shows you what it's like in a different environment. And the opening King of the Crystal Skull doesn't really have much Indiana Jones character as well, but that's the least of that film's problems. But the point I'm making is I wish the opening of this movie added more to the Indiana Jones character. I'm fine with the idea of them doing a callback to Last Crusade or Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I just wish it added more to that character. And why was the de-aging used? I don't know. I don't understand why the de-aging was used actually, but at the same time, it took me out of it a bit. That's one of the reasons I don't love the opening, and one of the reasons I don't think I'll ever love the opening, even though it's slightly grown on me since the days I first saw it. I didn't love the de-aging in the opening sequence because it looked a bit Polar Express. It looked like the characters out of Polar Express or the characters out of A Christmas Carol, you know, that similar sort of look where it's almost human but it doesn't look quite human, so it looks a bit alien-y and it doesn't really work. And it also looked a bit video gamey, and I don't want that from an Indiana Jones movie. I want realism, I want grittiness in an Indiana Jones film, and I didn't feel I got that because of the de-age thing. I didn't really like the de-agedness, that's not even a word, but the de-aged look of Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones in that opening. It took me out of it a bit, even though the opening has slightly grown on me. One of the reasons the opening has grown on me is because I like the introduction to Jürgen Voller, the villain, in that opening sequence, and I liked the John Williams musical score. You know, I didn't love the John Williams musical score in the opening sequence, but I liked it, and I liked the idea, and I also liked seeing Bamber Castle. You know, the beginning of this film in 1944 is meant to take place in Germany, although it's at Bamber Castle, which I was on holiday near in April. So the fact that I got to see Bamber Castle and where I walked about in Bamber Castle in an Indiana Jones movie brought a huge smile to my face. I wish though that the opening was a bit better. Yeah, it is what it is. I really like the rest of the movie, but I think the reason I really like the rest of the movie is because I think James Mangold's heart is in the story he wants to tell with, pardon me, old Indy in 1969, not this Indiana Jones that we meet, I'm guessing, at the age of 45 at the start of this movie. I just didn't really care about it too much. I really like Toby Jones in that opening, by the way. One thing I haven't mentioned, Toby Jones as Basil Shaw. I think he's great in that opening, and I never expect to see Toby Jones in an Indiana Jones movie, but you know what? I thought he worked. I just wish the opening was better. Didn't grab me, and it didn't have that same grit. Although the other action sequences in the movie, you know, I thought did have that same grit and felt very Indiana Jones, just didn't have the same Spielberg touch at the same time. So, yeah, the action sequences felt Indiana Jones, just, I don't know. They didn't feel Indiana Jones enough, if you get what I mean. I'm not even sure if I get what I mean now. Anyway, let's count on some of the things that I want to talk about in regards to this film. Sallah! Sallah came back. John Rhys Davies as Sallah. I love Sallah. I loved him in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I loved him in Last Crusade. And I love how they reintroduced him in this movie. You know, there's that guy who's watching, he's next to Indy, and they're watching all the TV screens in this shop talk about how Indy is a wanted man, and the guy goes, he looks a bit like you. It is you, and then Sallah punches him, and I like how they reintroduce Sallah. Salah's now a granddad as well, which I really liked because, you know, he does have kids and Raiders, and so it's only a little detail of that, but it's a little detail I really liked. And yeah, I really like the use of Sallah in this movie. Was it needed? Was he totally needed? No. They could have taken that character out, and this film would have probably been the same. But it's never bad seeing Sallah there. And as a huge Indiana Jones fan, and as someone who's a fan of John Rhys Davies, not only in this role, but also in the role of Gimli in the Lord of the Rings films, I liked seeing him back, especially as he's older. And I did doubt whether he would come back because he refused to come back for Crystal Skull, even though they asked him to. But he did come back, and I was glad that he did. And I liked how they were incorporated into the film. And I liked how he wasn't just in one sequence. Like, I thought it was only in that one sequence where he goes, give him hell, Indiana Jones, like they kept showing the trailers. But then he came back at the end. And I like at the end how he's singing as he walks, as he walks away from Indy and Marion. You hear him singing down as he walks down the stairs, and that's a nice little callback to when Marion kisses him in Raiders. Yeah, it's a nice little callback there for huge Indiana Jones fans. And you know, they tease that he could have gone on the adventure with Indy. They say that I've got my passport with me as he's dropping Indy at the airport. But he doesn't go on the adventure with Indy. And part of me does, you know, the child in me wanted to see Sallah on another adventure with Indiana Jones. But also, John Rhys Davies is an old man now. And I think that, you know, it just would have been one character too many. I think Crystal Skull had one character too many on the adventure. And I think just having two characters on the adventure of Indy's movie worked. I like that whole idea of just having one character or just two characters on the adventure of Indy. And I did hear as well Karen Allen, who plays Marion, say that she wished she had more of a bigger role in this film. You know, she was glad that she got to come back, but she wished that she had more of a bigger role. And I understand where she's coming from, but again, if she was on the adventure, it just would have been another person, and you know, they got to think of another plot line there, and I'm just not sure if it would have worked. You know, the characters which were on the adventure were all vital. Teddy was vital to the adventure. He saves Indy and Helena at the end, and you know, he gets to play and everything. He gets to play, and it's implied that he gets him back to 1969, and also he takes down one of the henchmen when in the cave at one point, when in the tomb and everything. You know, he's vital to the plot, and I enjoy that character. And also Helena's vital to the plot as well. But so I was fine. And so I was fine with just those two characters, because if Marion or Sallah won the adventure, I don't know. I'm not sure if it totally would have worked. And back onto the topic of Teddy. I liked Teddy in this film, as I've already spoken about. I think the kid who plays him, I forgot the actor's name off the top of my head, even though I already looked at it this morning on IMDb. I liked the character of Teddy in this movie. He brings a lot of energy to that role, and he makes it more of a family adventure. Although it does feel a bit like a pseudo short one, like a poor man's short one, that character. And I was a bit sad that short one wasn't in this movie, especially since Ke-Huy Quan seems like he's having a bit of a resurgence right now after everything gave all at once, and apparently it's going to be in Loki Series 2, so good for him. You know, even though I understand why Short One was in this movie, I would have liked to see him. But then, the more I think about it, the more I think, where would he have come in then? Because he could have had him at the end when Indy woke up back in 1969. But then there's one character too many in there, and has Short Round met Marion? Has Short Round met Sallah? I don't know. There's gaps you have to fill in there, and it may have been one character too many. And yes, it would have been nice to see Short Round in this movie, and that's one of the things I did want going in. But I'm also fine with the fact that he's not. You know, not all your expectations can be met, and the fact that Short Round wasn't in this movie, I was fine about. Would I like to see him, but at the same time, it is what it is. It's only one character, and you know, it's a little disappointment, but it's not a huge disappointment. I liked the henchman in this movie. I keep forgetting how to pronounce his name. Vergen or Zergen, I can't remember now. Ergen Voller's henchman. I think that's how you pronounce the character's name. Ergen Voller and his henchman. I like the henchman in this movie. Boyd Holbrook plays one of them. He played one of the henchmen in Logan as well. Another James Mangold movie, so it makes sense why he's in this film. I liked him in this role. I also like the big henchman as well. Although, I didn't like the way that big henchman died. You know, Teddy just throws him in this lake, in the cave, in this river, in this cave, and he just dies. It's implied that he drowns under there. I think they could have done more with that henchman. I'm not saying that I want him to fight Indy, because Indy in this movie is quite frail, and the henchman's quite big. He's a really muscly guy. Reminds you of the Mountain in Game of Thrones. But at the same time, I just think there could have been more done with that character. I liked him in the film, but, you know, yeah, I just wish he had a better fate. And is there anything else I've got to mention? I'll talk about all the big plot points. Yeah, I think I have, you know. I liked all the action sequences. I didn't love them, but they were entertaining enough, and I thought they were better. I thought overall the action sequences were better than they were in Crystal Skull. And that's another point I want to talk about, actually. Is there anything King of the Crystal Skull does better? It's a good question. You know, I've been comparing this movie a lot to Crystal Skull, and the reason being is because they're both old man Indiana Jones movies. We both follow the character of Indiana Jones when he's at an older age. But I think Crystal Skull has a better reintroduction for the character of Indiana Jones. I liked his reintroduction quite a lot in that movie. Just the one scene where he picks up the hat and all the Russians are going round him and he goes, I hate Russians. He says something like that. And also, I really enjoyed the ant fight sequence, you know, the fight sequence, the puncher sequence with Indy and the Russian that took place around the ants in Crystal Skull as well. And I don't know, that might be it, you know. That might be the only two moments that I think are better than anything in Dial of Destiny. And not anything in Dial of Destiny, but the only two moments which I think are better than some moments in Dial of Destiny. You know, I think overall Dial of Destiny is a far superior film. But I do wish this movie had something like the ant fight sequence in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and had a better reintroduction to the character of Indiana Jones. because I do feel that the opening sequence of the movie, and that's another reason that I have a problem with it, took you away from that reintroduction that we were waiting for Indiana Jones for 15 years since Crystal Skull, and it took you away from that. And so I do think the reintroduction to Indy is better in Crystal Skull, and I also think the ant fight sequence is really good, and I missed something like that from this movie. But overall, I think Dial of Destiny is a far superior film, because there's so many lines of dialogue, and one line of dialogue I really wish was in this movie, lines of dialogue I really wish was in Dial of Destiny, is the line from Jim Broadbent that I spoke about in my Chemical Skull podcast, which was, "We seem to have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away." Jim Broadbent's Professor character in Crystal Skull says that to Indy in Crystal Skull when they're both being fired from their jobs, or they've both been let go from their profession, and I really wish that line of dialogue was said in this movie instead, because I think it would have added a lot more to it. And so, yeah, I think mostly Dial of Destiny is a better movie, but I do think Crystal Skull does a few things better. And just, yeah, is there anything else we got to mention? I really love the airport scene later on in the film. And I should also say the John Williams musical score. It's a really great score. And I really love Helena's theme. You know, you know, all the best John Williams themes, as Edgar Wright says, you can sing. And that's a good theme that you can sing. You can sing that theme, you know, much like the Jurassic Park theme, you can sing it. Much like the Harry Potter theme, you can sing it. And much like the Indiana Jones theme, you can sing it as well. And I also liked the theme for the Nazis in the film as well. You know, bum bum, ba-dum bum, ba-dum bum, ba-dum bum bum bum. You can tell that I've already been listening to the soundtrack. It's a great score. Although it is my least favourite of all the John Williams musical scores, I don't care, as I've already mentioned. I really don't care. I'm just glad we got another John Williams Indiana Jones score. Although I do wish that the Raiders March was used to more effect, perhaps in the third act. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But maybe that would have worked. Maybe it wouldn't. But the Raiders March only really is only really played when the credits start in this movie, and it feels like they were holding off from playing the Raiders March in the main Indiana Jones theme, and I'm not sure why. And I do wish it was used a bit more. Other than that, I think it's a great score, and I'm really happy John Williams came back to do another score. Other points I almost forgot to mention, no snakes in this movie. Each Indiana Jones movie, as far as I remember, has had a moment with snakes. Raiders famously does, when it comes face to face with the snakes in the Well of Souls. Last Crusade, I'm sure does. Maybe it doesn't actually. No, it does, with the young Indy at the start, which shows you, shows you that why Indy hates snakes. I think Temple of Doom does, and Kingdom of Crystal Skull does as well. You know, in that sequence where Mutt and Marion are saying to Indy, just imagine it's a rope when he has to hold onto the snake to get out of the quicksand. Not a great sequence in that movie, but still, he has moments with snakes. This film doesn't, and part of me thinks that maybe there was a snake sequence in there in an original cut or in the original script, but that they took it out. Because, and one of the reasons I think this is because on the old Indiana Jones figure that is coming out by Hasbro in the next couple of months, he comes with a mini toy snake. And I think, and the base figures and Lego sets and whatnot off concept art, so I think there were snakes in an original version of this film. However, there's not. And I'm okay about that. It's only one little detail. Sure, it'd be nice to have snakes in this movie. We had the bugs back as well when they go into the tomb or into the mine later on in Sicily. You know, later on in the movie, you had the bugs again, which is a nice little callback to Temple of Doom. And so I didn't mind that they weren't snakes. It would have been nice, but I was fine about that. And they did have the Eels sequence, which I quite enjoyed. You know, now we had Raiders, we had snakes, Temple of Doom had bugs, Last Crusade had rats, Kingdom of Crystal Skull had ants, and Dial of Destiny had eels. I thought that worked. I liked that. I mean, the eels were CGI, but the ants were CGI, and Kingdom of Crystal Skull, and it didn't really bother me in there. You know, and I liked how they did, how the kid says, you know, Teddy says, when they're about to go in the water with the eels, Teddy says to Indy, oh, they're like snakes, and Indy goes, no, they're not. So they did reference the snakes, and how Indy is afraid of snakes. He's one big phobia. But, you know, it would have been nice to have snakes. They just weren't in there, and that's fine. And I do think one thing that one of my brothers pointed out to me, who saw the movie in the last couple of days as well, one of the things they point out to me, which I don't actually have an answer for, is when Indy goes back to the when Indy goes back to his present in 1969 at the end of the movie, why is he no longer a wanted man? Because when he leaves New York, one of the reasons he leaves New York to go to Morocco is, yes, to chase after the dial and get Helena to give it him back, but also it's because he's a wanted man. And yet at the end of the movie, when they return to 1969, he's not a wanted man. It's just a little detail, and it would have been a bit convoluted, and it might have been a bit messy if they reference that detail and again at the end, but you know, it does make you think, why was he a wanted man at the end? I don't understand that. But I think this film works, even though I have my quarrels with it, even though I've got 2 problems with the film, mainly the villain and mainly the dial. I still really liked it. I still had a good time with this film, and you know what? I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that this was a good Indiana Jones film. I'm glad that it was, because I was waiting for this film for so long. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was the first film I remember seeing at the cinema, and Dial of Destiny, watching the cinema, was a full circle moment, and God, it felt great to watch another Indiana Jones movie in the cinema. And the fact that it was a good Indiana Jones movie. I mean, it's not a great Indiana Jones movie, but it's a great old man Indiana Jones film. This film is far superior than Crystal Skull because it approached the idea of Indy being old as its subject matter, its main subject, and it does it well. It really does it well. And there's so many moments in the movie where I was smiling and really enjoying myself. And I liked the character of Helena Shaw. I don't care what anyone says. I thought that character worked, and I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge did a good job playing that character. I liked Mads Mikkelsen quite a lot as Jürgen Voller. Just wish that character was written better. Although one thing I will say is I love one line of dialogue between Jürgen Voller and Indy when they were at the auction together. And Jürgen Voller says to Indy, "You should have stayed in New York." And then Indy goes, "You should have stayed out of Poland." I laughed my head off at that in the cinema because that was such a classic Indy line. And I think that the writers did a good job, you know, even though they aren't the predominant writers of the Indiana Jones character, they did a good job with Indiana Jones script, in my opinion. I really liked the script of the film, and I think James Mangold did a good job directing. Sure, it's not Spielberg, but it wasn't going to be Spielberg, and I'm okay with how he directed. In fact, I think he did a really good job. I think he really shined in the dialogue scenes of the movie, which I think are particularly well done. There's a particular sort of style of directing there, which I think only James Mangold can bring to those sequences. I thought the action sequences worked. My favourite action sequence probably was the chase through New York with the parade. I thought that was a really good action sequence when he goes in the subway. I thought the tuk-tuk chase works. I like how it evokes past Indiana Jones action sequences. I just wish it had more gravitas in the directing like Spielberg's directing does in so many previous action sequences, but I still think it worked. I like the Eels sequence as well. Sure, there could have been a big action sequence in the finale of the movie, but I still found the fact that there wasn't. And there was a lot that I really, really enjoyed. I particularly really enjoyed the airport sequence when you see all the neo-Nazis and you see Jürgen Voller dress as a Nazi again, and you see him dressed as a Nazi again, and like, oh god, now you can see them putting their plan into action. I really liked that scene. I thought it had a great John Williams musical score, and I just really enjoyed the film. I really liked it. It's not great, as what he mentioned, but it's a great old Indiana Jones movie, you get what I mean? It's not a great movie, because I don't think there could be a great... I'm not sure if I make myself clear here, actually. I don't think there can be a great movie centered around the old Indiana Jones character. I don't think that movie can be great. And I think this film is weighed down by its MacGuffin and by the villain. But I think it's a great old Indiana Jones movie, if you get what I mean. I'm not sure if you do get what I mean there. I'm not sure if I explain myself. Or even if I'm making sense to myself, actually. Because, is it a great movie? I keep saying, is it a great old Indiana Jones movie? And I keep saying, yes, it is. And, you know, and then I keep saying it's not a great movie, though. But that doesn't make sense. You know what? I'm going to say it. I think it's a great movie. I don't care what anyone says. I think Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a great movie. So, this is an add-on. One thing I forgot to mention, I literally just remembered about it just as I finished recording. Like, I literally just finished recording this podcast on Dial of Destiny. One thing I forgot to do is my ranking of all 5 Indiana Jones movies now. So even though many of you may have guessed it already, for me, number 1 is Last Crusade, number 2 is Temple of Doom, number 3 is Raiders of the Lost Ark, and number 4 on my ranking is Dial of Destiny, and number 5 is Crystal Skull. I find there are good qualities about all these movies, even Crystal Skull, but that would be my ranking. And you know what? Dial of Destiny is not far away from my ranking of the first 3. It really isn't. I mean, I much prefer the first 3, don't get me wrong. If I had the choice, I'd watch any of the first 3 Indiana Jones movies over Dial of Destiny. But I still think Dial of Destiny is a really great film. So yeah, that is my ranking of all 5 Indiana Jones movies. Now, let's get back to the podcast. And do I like it just because I'm an Indiana Jones fan? This is the last point I'll say. Do I like this movie so much because I'm an Indiana Jones fan? Maybe. I'm not going to give a definitive answer on that because I can't answer it, you know, definitively because I am an Indiana Jones fan. I can't answer this objectively because that's just the way my brain works. And I am a huge Indiana Jones fan, so I'd have to ask somebody else about that. But if you were a non-Indiana Jones fan or just a general Indiana Jones fan, you've seen one of the Indiana Jones movies and you're thinking about watching this one, but you're not sure on it, I would say go and watch it. Because I do think this is a great movie about an adventurer and where he is at this point in his life after he's been through all this stuff and he is at the age of 70 and, you know, he's got no one around him. You know, how would this adventure that we came to know and love through Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom and Last Crusade, where would this character be at now? And that's why I think it's a good movie. That's why I think it's a great movie even. So, yeah, I do think it's a great movie. Besides being an Indiana Jones film, I can't answer that question definitively because I'm an Indiana Jones fan. But if I wasn't an Indiana Jones fan, I think, and I'm not 100% on this, but I think I would say it would be a good movie nonetheless. But I am an Indiana Jones fan, and as a big Indiana Jones fan, as somebody who has Last Crusade as their favourite movie of all time, as of today means some days it's Empire Strikes Back, but as of today it's Last Crusade. For somebody who says Last Crusade is their favourite movie, yeah, this one worked for me. I was waiting for it for so long, and, you know, it's not perfect. It does have some missed opportunities, maybe a short round cameo, maybe, you know, I've already spoken about missed opportunities, I've already spoken about length about this movie, but the point is, I liked it, I thought it was great, and you know what, I'm really happy that I did, and I've rambled on way too much, but you know what, it worked for what it was. It worked as a great old Indiana Jones movie. It's not Raiders, it's not Temple of Doom, it's not Last Crusade, and I am okay about that. I'm fine about that. It was never gonna be those movies, and it's a damn good movie for what it is, at least for me. And so, to give my final Indiana Jones rating, I'm gonna put on the hat and I'm gonna say that Dial of Destiny, you know what? I'm gonna rank it slightly higher than I initially ranked it. I'm going to say it's a 7. I'm going to say that it's a... Actually, you know what? Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I like it. I'm going to say it's an 8 out of 10. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, it's just an 8 out of 10. But it is an 8 out of 10 for me because it's a solid film. And it's one of those films that the more I think about it, the more I like it. I really, really, really like this movie. And I'm looking forward to rewatching it. I think it's the best end to the Indiana Jones character we could have got. I think it's the best version of this film that we could have got. And you know what? The more I think about it, the more I like it, the more I just admire what this film does. Sure, the villain isn't great, but the rest of the movie, I do think is. I mean, the dial isn't great either, just because of the way it's written into the story, but I don't mind the time travel element, as I've already said. I've already spoken way too much about this film, and I do ramble on way too much, but yeah, this is my last Indiana Jones review. I wanted to give a big spoiler review of it, and hopefully I've done a good one. So to round off this review though, I will say that I think Indiana Jones The Dial of Destiny works for what it is because it's a great old Indiana Jones film and it approaches the idea of Indiana Jones being gold in the best way possible. And yeah, Really liked it. I even liked the bold decisions it made in its third act of the whole stuff with time travel. I thought it made sense, and yeah, I thought it was a great movie. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is an 8 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that is it for this podcast for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did enjoy this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also let me know your thoughts. I said it again there, and also let me know your thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie. Maybe you loved it, maybe you hated it. If you did hate it, that's totally fine. Just be respectful in the comments and let me know why. Anyway guys, thank you as always for watching, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. I look forward to many more podcasts coming very soon on this channel. But for the last time, and only time actually, because I haven't said this ever before, but for the last time, I hope you enjoyed this Indiana Jones review, and thank you as always for watching or listening, and I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.